WCCO Television presents an I-Team special.
Night falls on the city of Minneapolis, and fears rise.
Some say the streets are no longer safe on Hennepin Avenue.
For 4 months, our I-Team crew walked these same streets.
Not looking for trouble, but looking for the police who were supposed to be protecting us.
What they found were some members of the Minneapolis Downtown Foot Patrol missing the beat. Hello, I'm Don Shelby.
And I'm Colleen Needles. Chances are you've heard about our I-Team investigation of the Minneapolis Downtown Foot Patrol.
Rarely does a report like this receive so much media attention, but this one touched a nerve that branched from outstate Minnesota to Minneapolis City Hall.
Since we aired our two-part I-Team report earlier this month, we have received hundreds of calls and responses from viewers who wanted to know more about our investigation.
During this special, you'll get a chance to see both parts of the I-Team investigation, and we'll also show you the response we got from the community at one of our Feedback 4 sessions. And we'll update you on what's happened since the stories aired.
And now here's part 1 of the I-Team's Missing the Beat with reporter Caroline Lowe.
This is a downtown foot patrol. It's supposed to make people feel safe, criminals uncomfortable. But as the I-Team discovered, sometimes the police we pay to protect us are missing the beat. Our undercover team of photographers and reporters spent nearly 4 months and hundreds of hours here on Hennepin Avenue, a hot spot for trouble. We wanted to know about crime, and we wanted to know about cops. Busy nights on Hennepin, plenty of people, plenty of places to go. Where are the police who protect them? We found them playing pinball, working a private security job in the middle of a shift. And we found them hanging out at restaurants and bars. And in this strip joint, watching topless dancers. We even found them napping in a public place. And while the police were there, we were here. Our undercover cameras capturing crime, watching drug deals.
You got quarters, eighths, whatever you need. Whatever you need.
The 13 officers assigned to the Foot Patrol are supposed to walk the beat, give downtown a high-profile police presence. But when the I-Team hit the streets during some of the busiest days and nights, the officers were seldom in sight, so we went to find them. We found some of them here at the Skyway Lounge strip joint at 8th and Hennepin. Our undercover cameras caught them playing games, watching dancers, reading the newspaper. One night, this cop stayed 1 hour and 22 minutes during his 10-hour shift. Another night, another cop. 2 visits, 2 hours. Now you might think this bar is a trouble spot for crime. Not so. Last year it had far fewer police calls than most downtown bars.
See you guys.
And yet, on 13 of the 16 nights the I-Team watched the bar, we saw officers go there. Sometimes 2 or 3 at a time, several times a night, and some stayed for lengthy periods. Because of what we saw there, we set up cameras for a 10-hour shift at 7th and Hennepin, one of the most dangerous corners downtown. This bus stop is known for violence, drug deals, and other street crimes, a place supervisors have encouraged the patrol to watch. But during the 10 hours we were here, we didn't see any officers on this corner for a 2-hour stretch. On another night, when parents and children hustled past the corner toward the Target Center to see Beauty and the Beast, we found 3 members of the Foot Patrol at the Nankin Bar, taking a break. They talked, read the newspaper, drank coffee, their backs to the window. Many nights, we saw officers playing pinball for an hour for 45 minutes. And there were 2 officers we saw no more than 4 times during the hundreds of hours our team was on Hennepin. All this may leave you wondering who's running the unit. That would be Lieutenant Dale Rawlsing, 37 years on the Minneapolis Police Department. He's been running the Downtown Foot Patrol since it was started 4 years ago. But when we went looking for the lieutenant, we usually found him in his office behind closed doors, except on certain nights when we saw him do something that seemed unusual. Rawlsing left his office in the middle of his shift, and he drove here to Orchestra Hall. He was here on January 28th, March 23rd, and on April 6. Each time, he spent an hour or two watching the crowds.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Orchestra Hall.
The I-Team learned that's where Rawlsing works a second job, as head of security. He gets paid by Orchestra Hall, too. On April 6, when our cameras were there, so was Minneapolis Police Chief John Locks, the lieutenant's boss. He was there to attend the show. And records obtained by the I-Team show that Rawlsing later turned in a time card taking 2 hours off duty. He called it vacation. That 2-hour vacation was the only one he took this year.
It certainly begs the question for a detailed, in-depth investigation, which should always show that the job of being a Minneapolis police officer comes first. You're either on my clock or you're on somebody else's, but you're not on both. And if that's the case, he's got a problem.
That brings us back to the beat, the streets where things have gotten ugly, and someone needs a cop. A violent fight here in the lobby of the Skyway Theater spills onto the sidewalk. No cops in sight. The suspect simply walks away, disappearing into the Hennepin Avenue scene. Where were the cops? During the assault, 2 of them were in the very same theater, right upstairs, sleeping in the back row. For the I-Team, I'm Caroline Lowe.
Almost immediately after we ran that report, an internal affairs investigation began, and the headlines reflected the fate of the officers in question, the future of the Downtown Foot Patrol, and the entire Minneapolis Police Department.
The fingers of blame all seem to point in one direction, City Hall. People wanted answers, and the first reactions we got were from those in charge.
If I allow it to continue, then we all have a problem. And I guarantee you, it will not continue. I will do something about this. They'll be held responsible.
I certainly, want to see any officer who is loafing or who is not doing their job or who is taking an extra paycheck doing off-duty work disciplined accordingly.
And that was just the beginning. When we come back, we'll present part 2 of Missing the Beat and update you on the most recent changes in the Minneapolis Police Department.
When our investigation of the Minneapolis Downtown Foot Patrol began in January of this year, reporter Caroline Lowe and photojournalist Nancy Suhu spent dozens of hours walking and observing the streets of downtown Minneapolis.
It became apparent pretty quickly that there was a lack of police presence on the streets. So on 3 different nights, our I-Team crews followed Foot Patrol officers during their 10-hour shifts. And on March 10th, our cameras found 2 officers missing the beat. Here's part 2.
March 10, 1994, a Thursday night in downtown Minneapolis.
No major industry, just miles and miles of parking space.
A concert crowd fills the Target Center and the city streets. And like always, Hennepin Avenue is busy. Busy with people and busy with problems. Tonight, a fight in the lobby of the Skyway movie theater. Several minutes later, these 2 officers arrive at the scene. So do 3 squad cars and an ambulance. But while all of this is going on downstairs, the I-Team found 2 officers upstairs, just seconds away, but still missing the beat. During the past 4 months, our undercover team of photographers and reporters spent hundreds of hours here on Hennepin Avenue watching the Downtown Foot Patrol. We saw some of them spending lengthy periods of time in bars, restaurants, and a strip joint. But how much is too much? The I-Team wanted to find out, so we walked these streets for 2 10-hour shifts and followed 4 veteran officers, cops who were supposed to make the streets feel safe for us. On one night, we followed officers Timothy Merkel and Michael Morales. From what we saw, they spent their time like we'd expect, on the streets walking, watching, talking to people.
Are them clove cigarettes?
Yeah, what one?
Smell them a mile away.
Tastes great.
On another night, a different story. This is Officer Robert Dean, Officer John Levine. Both have been on the Minneapolis Police Department since 1975. Both make more than $45,000 a year. We wanted to know just what they do. 4:35 p.m. After roll call, Officers Dean and Levine hit the streets. Almost immediately, they split up. Dean's first stop, the Skyway Strip Joint. Total time, 15 minutes. Dean leaves and runs into two other cops on a routine call. But at 5 p.m., just a half hour after he's hit the streets, Dean heads here to the Blues Alley, a bar he seems to know well.
You asshole.
Officer Dean makes himself comfortable with the bartender, with the patrons,
Just Dave, when he walks in, just tell him, shut up, I got a validated bar pass.
with the bar's owner, and even with the bar. 5:25 p.m. Officer Levine pulls up in his personal pickup and parks in front of the bar. Together, the two officers watch TV, drink coffee, smoke, read the newspaper, and talk on the phone. Total time in Blues Alley for Officer Dean, 1 hour and 37 minutes. For Officer Levine, 1 hour and 12 minutes. By now it is getting dark. People are headed downtown for the Billy Joel concert, for dinner, or just for fun. 6:37 p.m. The officers finally leave the bar and walk right back to their office. They stay for 35 minutes. 7:30 p.m. The officers head east on Hennepin. 15 minutes later, we find Officer Dean at a pinball arcade, where we have seen him before, playing pinball. At 8:05 p.m., dinner. Dean goes to the Pickled Parrot, another 35 minutes. And at 8:45, Dean meets up with Levine near the Target Center. They walk back to the Skyway Strip Joint. When we saw the pair inside, they were just sitting, watching dancers. Total time this visit, 25 minutes. And when they leave, they don't go far. 9:15 p.m., a new movie is showing next door, Greedy with Michael J. Fox. And where did our cameras find them? In the theater, up the stairs, here in the back row. So we went in too. Although it was too dark to record clear pictures, two I-Team producers sat 4 rows away and watched. A third producer stood behind them as the officers took off their hats, kicked up their feet, and watched the movie. While they were doing that, something was happening in the lobby. Violence erupts, the kind of fight we all fear, and the suspect just walks away into the night. A doorman frantically hails a squad car. While other police and rescue workers respond, Officers Dean and Levine are still upstairs at the movies. Could there be a reason? We asked Minneapolis Police Chief John Locks.
Watching a full-length movie, I can't think of one. It's absolutely wrong.
It gets worse. A half hour later, when thousands of Billy Joel fans head home, the officers are still sitting in the near-empty theater. But the movie apparently didn't hold their attention. Our producers can see them sleeping, hear them snoring. They don't leave until 11:15, when the movie's over. Total time in the theater, 2 hours.
You've got lazy, unresponsive, uncaring police officers. And that's 180 degrees from the message I want to send. Officers will pay the price for inappropriate, either misconduct or poor performance.
Officers Dean and Levine spend the rest of their shift at the strip joint, 22 minutes. At Subway for 30 minutes. And another bar, another 40 minutes.
Taxpayers didn't get their money's worth that night. That concerns me, and that's something I will investigate.
At 1:15, 45 minutes left in their shift, Levine and Dean go back to Blues Alley, their final stop after a night of work on the Minneapolis Downtown Foot Patrol.
Taxpayers didn't get their money's worth that night.
For the I-Team, I'm Caroline Lowe.
Amid the controversy, officers Robert Dean and John Levine stayed on the foot patrol for another 2 weeks. However, their supervisors, Sergeant Boyd Blomberg and Lieutenant Dale Rawlsing, were transferred within days. Public and political pressure continued until Minneapolis Police Chief John Laux transferred Dean and Levine. The internal police investigation continues.
So how does the community feel about these repercussions? Has justice been done? Who's walking the downtown Minneapolis beat now? And is it safe to go there after dark? These are the questions we all asked. The answers in just a moment.
We think it's important to hear what you, the viewers, have to say about our I-Team investigations. To get some immediate results on missing the beat, we gathered a group from the Twin Cities area for a Feedback 4 Interact session in our studio the night our second report aired. This is what they had to say.
Violence erupts, the kind of fight we all fear.
The purpose of the Feedback 4 Interact session was twofold. One, to get an immediate reaction to the missing the beat reports, and two, to determine what issues deserve clarification or a follow-up report. Let's start with the good story. What did you like about it? Which of the following responses to our questions were recorded via an interactive system called RSVP. Even though the participants responded anonymously, many felt the need to voice their opinions.
Of course, you are going to have a few bad individuals as a part of a group. Police are supposed to be kind of holier than thou and always constantly 100%.
I mean, they were just so visible in these places, and they didn't seem to be too concerned with that.
Yes, we need more police on the streets, but we also need more educational funding within the police department.
Well, this piece didn't show that.
At times, the group was also critical of our I-Team investigation.
And maybe there is corruption within the system, but this piece certainly didn't show that, and I don't see how anybody can have that deduction that there's corruption in the police department.
One thing that stood out to me, especially in part one, was I felt that the way that the story was done was really to prey upon the fear that people who are outside of the downtown community feel towards downtown.
That last comment prompted us to ask the question, after viewing the I-Team reports, do you feel more personally threatened about coming to downtown Minneapolis? 49% of the group felt their safety was more threatened, and 6% felt drastically threatened. Another question that sparked discussion was this one. How accountable should Police Chief John Laux be for the officers' behavior? 59% said very accountable. 24% said somewhat accountable.
It was mismanagement, and he is very accountable. And his answer, I mean, sure, he gave you the standard pat answer, but you almost need to follow up then and say, okay, what are you going to do about it now? What did you find out?
What do you think should be done? The group also felt strongly about the fate of the offending officers. 44% felt they should be fired, and 26% thought they should be suspended.
And the feedback to our reports didn't stop there. As the headlines began piling up, so did the phone calls to City Hall. Initially, it was public officials who were put on the spot.
It is absolutely important that every citizen of this community believe that the police officer that wears the badge, wears the uniform, is out there working with them and for them.
From the mayor's office to the city council.
But the explanation that you're giving me, no offense, but it doesn't seem rational.
Everyone was calling for action.
I just think that this thing could be dealt with a lot swifter. I think that there's some immediate action that should have taken place.
Then, in two separate statements, Police Chief John Laux announced his decisions. On May 3rd, Lieutenant Dale Rawlsing and Sergeant Boyd Blomberg were transferred. It was also announced that two officers we rarely saw, Leonard Wood and James Johnson, would retire. Then on May 11th, officers Robert Dean and John Levine were also transferred to other assignments within the force. The response also prompted action that affected the entire police force. The city created a task force to study the issue of off-duty police work. It was announced that they would hire an outside consultant to review the inner workings of the Minneapolis Police Department.
We want them to be where the people are when the people are there.
And now the Downtown Minneapolis Foot Patrol has an interim supervisor with a new vision.
I told them I want them to be like the concierge of downtown. I want them to be the ambassadors here.
The people with me now are the three individuals primarily responsible for getting the story on the air. They are photojournalist Nancy Suhu and producer Jackie Petchel and reporter Caroline Lowe. How'd you get the idea for the story?
Well, it really began very routinely. Nancy Suhu and I were making the rounds at the police department where I cover crime, and we were talking with Deputy Chief Dave DeBracca one day last fall. He told us about some surveillance tape he'd seen at 2 MTC bus stops downtown. He said if the public saw the tape, the really blatant criminal activity going on there, that they would be shocked. Well, Nancy and I attended a screening of the tape with members of the Downtown Foot Patrol. Afterwards, we decided we would do our own look at crime downtown. As we began researching the problem and talking to a number of officers, several of them commented they thought that the police, specifically the Foot Patrol, was not doing their job, several members of it, and that was part of the problem. So we decided to take a look at that.
And just the physical problem of getting pictures of individuals doing their job without them knowing is a pretty tough task, Nancy. How do you get the pictures like that?
Don, Caroline and I spent dozens of hours on Hennepin Avenue trying to establish the behavior of these officers, and our goal, of course, for the project was to document them in a way that we would not be noticed. And our biggest, I guess, our logistical problem was trying to figure out where they were and map them out for the actual surveillance.
And not be seen when you were doing that.
That's right.
Well, that brings up the issue of undercover cameras and surreptitious photography, and it's an ethical issue that has been haunting television for a while. And as producer Jackie Petchel, it's a question you have to answer every time someone is concerned about it.
That's right, and I was very pleased with the way we handled that, because in this instance, every time we used a camera, it was always used in a public or a semi-public place. We went any place that a citizen of this city could have gone, and I feel as though in that respect, all we did was provide literally an eye for people who could see what we saw every time we were out there. And there were no legal bounds crossed or no issue other than this is something that any of you could see anytime that you were there.
That is in fact the test, isn't it, that the law uses to find out whether something has been done illegally. If the general member of the public could see, then you can take a picture of it.
That's exactly right, and there was no issue of intrusion of privacy or any such thing, especially since we were dealing with people who are civil servants, and whatever they were doing and their behaviors were clear to anybody who might have been walking down Hennepin Avenue or been in any of the places where we were.
Finally, Caroline, this story, without question, embarrassed some police officers, and it embarrassed a police department and an entire city administration for that matter. But it wasn't, I guess, your object to embarrass people. But what is the object of telling a story like that?
As we were out there in the 80-plus hours, and Nancy and I were there, it's something we thought about a lot. We knew that it would affect many people beyond the individuals we were looking at. But the other thing that we went through as we were sitting there is we knew that when this was all done, when the dust had settled, when the heat had subsided, that the police presence would be increased on Hennepin Avenue. I never doubted that when this was presented to the public that there'd be enough of a reaction, and we've seen that. Even before it went on the air, we noticed a very visible difference in the police presence downtown.
Perhaps a safer place to be.
I think it is, and I wouldn't hesitate to go downtown and take my family downtown.
All right. We'll be back right after a break.
One of the most recent developments since we ran our Missing the Beat reports is that the police department has now added a day shift to the Downtown Foot Patrol. We've also learned that the city has received a grant they hope to use to create a horseback patrol.
Overall, the feedback we're getting is that the police are a lot more visible in downtown Minneapolis these days.
Before we go, we want to mention that our investigation does not stop here.
We have been and will continue to monitor the situation. And if anything should change or develop, we'll be sure to let you know. I'm Don Shelby.
And I'm Colleen Needles. Thank you for joining us.